All right, let's get into it. We're about to dive into one of the most incredible, surprising stories from the golden age of piracy. And trust me, it's going to challenge pretty much everything you think you know about those guys.
And we're going to kick things off with a whopper of a question. One that, let's be honest, sounds kind of crazy. Did a bunch of swashbuckling outlaws accidentally figure out democracy years before the great nations ever did?
You know, the image we all have, right? A brutal captain with an iron fist ruling his crew through pure terror. But the truth, at least for this specific wild period in history, is something else entirely. It's a story of rebellion, not just against merchant ships, but against the entire way the world worked back then.
To really wrap our heads around this paradox, we have to rewind the clock. We need to go back to a very specific moment when the seas were absolutely full of desperate, angry men.
So picture this, it's 1713. A massive, brutal war that stretched all across Europe has just ended. And you'd think, great, peace at last. But for thousands of sailors, peace was actually the worst thing that could have happened. It meant they were out of a job.
And these weren't just any sailors. No, these were privateers, basically government-hired pirates who had spent years legally raiding enemy ships for the British Empire. And then, overnight, the war ends, and the crown they served just cast them aside. Imagine that. No paycheck, no sense of purpose, and absolutely zero loyalty left. You've got a generation of highly skilled sea raiders adrift, a floating powder keg just waiting for a spark.
And that spark didn't just cause an explosion. It ignited something nobody could have ever predicted, a kind of pirate utopia, right in the heart of the Caribbean.
So, where do all these angry, unemployed sailors go? They needed a home base, a hideout far from the reach of kings and navies. And they found the perfect spot, Nassau. At the time, it was a failed, forgotten, totally lawless colony. It was the perfect blank canvas for them to create their own world. Now here's what just blows my mind. Look at how short-lived this whole experiment was. We're talking about a 5-year window. That's it. This pirate republic burned unbelievably bright for a moment. And then, poof, it was gone. It was intense, it was chaotic, and it was revolutionary.
And, I mean, they didn't just visit Nassau, they took it over. The governor of Bermuda was practically panicking in his reports, saying there were over 1,000 pirates there, completely overwhelming the handful of settlers. They didn't just live there, they effectively became the government.
Okay, so they have their own outlaw town. But how does a society made up of rebels and thieves actually govern itself? Well, this is where the story shifts from just being about robbery to being about something radical.
They lived and died by what's known as the Pirate Code. And let's be clear, this wasn't some loose set of suggestions, this was their constitution. This was the blueprint for their floating societies, and it laid out a system that was the total opposite of the world they'd run away from.
I mean, just think about this for a second. Back in the empires, power came from God, passed down through bloodlines. The king was king because God said so. But on a pirate ship, power came from the crew. The crew voted. It was a stunning, absolute rejection of monarchy.
And this just spells out how absolutely radical it was. The captain, even a guy as terrifying as Blackbeard, wasn't a tyrant. He was an elected official. And if the crew decided he was doing a bad job, they could vote him out. Simple as that. All the loot? It was shared out pretty much equally, which is just smart business. It keeps everyone motivated. And maybe the most shocking part, in a world built on the horrors of slavery, they offered escaped Africans a place as equals on their crews. This wasn't just some abstract ideal. It was a practical system that created the ultimate criminal enterprise.
But of course, you knew this couldn't last. An anarchist, democratic pirate republic sitting right smack in the middle of the world's most profitable trade routes, the empires were never going to let that stand.
Yeah, these guys weren't just hiding out. They were thinking big. This quote here shows it all. They saw Nassau, which was also called Providence, as the seed of a new pirate kingdom, a new Madagascar in the West. This made them a direct existential threat to colonial power.
All the raids on shipping were choking off trade and costing fortunes. So, back in London, King George I finally decided, okay, that's it. This pirate party is over.
And his main weapon, at first, wasn't a cannon. It was a piece of paper. The king's pardon. This was a brilliant move. It basically offered a get-out-of-jail-free card to any pirate who promised to give up the life. A clean slate.
And this is exactly how the empire brought it all crashing down. First, that pardon lands like a bombshell and instantly divides the pirates. Then, the new governor, A tough guy named Woodes Rogers shows up with a fleet of warships. Many pirates see the writing on the wall and take the deal. And in the most ironic twist of all, Rogers recruits the ex-pirate Benjamin Hornigold to hunt down his old buddies. The resistance that was left just crumbled, and the public execution of the last holdouts sent a very clear message: the Republic was dead.
The Republic of Pirates may have only lasted for 5 years, but its story leaves us with this incredible, fascinating legacy to think about.
So, here's the real takeaway. For this brief, shining moment, a group of society's rejects, unemployed sailors, escaped slaves, outcasts, they built a world on their own terms. And for all its violence and chaos, that world practiced a kind of liberty and equality that was completely unthinkable in the civilized nations that were hunting them down.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Were they just murderers and thieves? Or were they accidental visionaries, rebels who, in their defiance, stumbled upon ideals of freedom and democracy that the rest of